While everyone in the silver world is glued to March and the COMEX delivery window, something much bigger is quietly lining up right behind it. Not in March, in April 2026. You've heard all about the squeeze, the vault drain, the registered versus open interest drama. But almost no one is talking about the next 30 days on the calendar, a new critical mineral reporting mandate that could quietly change the meaning of private silver. A structural shift in industrial demand as solar tries to escape silver, while AI quietly locks it in. And a BRICS re-monetization rumor that, if even half true, would flip central banks from sellers to hungry buyers. If you think March is volatile, wait until you see the timeline around April. RateScope here. Today we're going to walk through why March is just the pressure zone and why April is shaping up to be the pivot, the point where industrial demand and new rules about critical minerals collide with your stack. This isn't about clickbait. It's about seeing the other half of the iceberg before it surfaces. For the last decade, the simple story has been solar eats silver, end of story. For a while that was true. Solar panels became the #1 industrial driver for silver demand. As governments subsidized green energy, panel installations exploded. Every new gigawatt of capacity quietly chewed through more ounces. Silver was the conductor in that system, literally and figuratively. But 2026 doesn't look like 2016, because in 2026, the solar industry is trying to thrift its way out of the silver trap. Companies like Jinko Solar and others have been increasingly open about a simple problem. Silver is too expensive. It's too constrained. They can't keep building their cost models around a metal that keeps getting tighter. So what do? They start shifting. To copper-based bus bars and contacts in new panel designs. To thinner silver pastes. To lower load configurations that squeeze more watts per gram of silver. Some of those changes begin rolling out in Q2 2026. On paper, you might look at that and think, so silver demand is dying, bearish, right? Not so fast. Because while solar is trying to use less, something else is trying to use more. And it's doing it in a way that's harder to thrift out of. That something is AI. Let's talk about the elephant in the data center. AI training servers are not normal servers. They are denser, hotter, more power hungry, far more complex in terms of interconnects and power distribution. Every one of those things leans on silver. Why? Silver is the best electrical conductor among metals. High-speed, low-latency connections between GPUs, memory, and storage need clean, high-performance paths. Power delivery systems in these giant racks have to handle huge loads with minimum loss and maximum reliability. When you compare a traditional cloud server cluster versus a modern AI training cluster, you're not just looking at more chips, you're looking at more connectors, more bonding wires, more contacts, more solder joints, more power delivery hardware. Estimates from industry sources suggest AI training servers can require roughly 3.5 times more silver than legacy cloud hardware on a per-rack basis. Multiply that across thousands of racks per data center, dozens of data centers per major AI player, and a global race between companies and nations to build more AI compute than the next guy, and you start to see a different story. Solar demand shifts and tries to lower per-unit usage. AI demand appears and is far harder to replace or compress. You can try to route around silver in a rooftop panel if you can maintain performance. You cannot easily route around silver in high-reliability contacts, bonding in advanced packaging, conductive pastes in high-end, high-temperature applications. So instead of a simple solar up, silver up narrative, 2026 gives you solar trying to wiggle free, AI stepping in as a new structural floor for silver. Not a spike, a baseline. Silver is no longer just jewelry, coins, a solar ingredient. It's quietly becoming the nervous system of the AI age. That means even if solar thrifting levels off some demand, AI may lock in a higher minimum demand line than we had 5 years ago. And that's before we layer in April's second potential shock. The biggest rumor on the April radar is not about COMEX, it's about currencies. Specifically, a BRICS unit currency, a trade settlement unit, designed to reduce dependence on the dollar, potentially backed by a basket of assets. We've heard for years they might use gold. What's now circulating quietly but more frequently is that silver may be designated as a Tier 2 reserve asset in that basket. The numbers floating around, silver could make up around 20% of the new trade unit's backing. Pause there for a second and follow the math. Global annual silver mine production is somewhere in the ballpark of 800 million ounces a year, give or take. Now imagine, a BRICS-aligned bloc decides that for their new trade unit, they want a steady reserve allocation to silver. If they aim for a strategic reserve target that requires 1.5 billion ounces over time, between central banks, state entities, and allied sovereign wealth funds, what does that mean? It means they are planning to accumulate almost 2 years' worth of global mine output, not as ETFs, not as short-term hedges, as a monetary component of a new system. Central banks historically have sold silver, ignored silver, or treated it as an afterthought relative to gold. If this rumor becomes policy, even partially, silver stops being off to the side and becomes a formal reserve target. Central banks go from potential net sellers to locked-in net buyers. If BRICS entities commit to that path in April, the market doesn't need to see all 1.5 billion ounces purchased on day one to react. It just needs to see formal language, clear reserve frameworks, and the first few big visible purchases. Because once that happens, miners, refiners, and big investors all know a new price-insensitive buyer just stepped on the field. A central bank or coordinated bloc doesn't care if silver is $25, $50, or $75 the way a day trader does. They care about weight and time. They'll buy through cycles and dips, quietly, relentlessly. So April isn't just another page on the calendar. It's potentially the date where silver moves one step closer to re-monetization in a major economic bloc, while also sitting at the center of AI infrastructure demand. If that combination sounds explosive, it's because it is. But there's a third piece that could hit at the same time, and this one isn't about demand. It's about control. The phrase on everyone's lips right now is critical minerals. In 2026, more and more jurisdictions are classifying silver, rare earths, certain battery metals as strategic assets. Why? Because energy policy, tech policy, defense policy are all colliding. When a metal moves from commodity to critical mineral, the game changes. Different reporting rules, different export rules, different emergency powers. What's surfacing in some draft documents and leaks for April 2026 is a new critical mineral reporting mandate for financial institutions and large custodians. If that goes live, here's what it could mean in practice. Any significant holdings of key metals, silver included, sitting in bank vaults, custodial programs, and certain regulated storage facilities will need to be logged, reported, potentially linked to beneficial owners, not in detail for the public, but in detail enough for regulatory agencies, crisis management teams, national security frameworks. If that happens, the definition of private silver shifts under your feet. Silver in a bank box or bank-run program moves closer to tracked strategic stock. Silver in true private storage, non-bank, pure bailment, remains harder to sweep into such systems. Silver at home becomes simultaneously more private and more vulnerable to physical risk, theft, disaster. The likely sequence, if that mandate appears in April: institutions scramble to make sure their reporting is accurate. Some storage programs start updating terms of service to reflect inventory disclosures. Future emergency orders, rationing, requisition, or allocation now have a map to work from. If that sounds like I'm jumping too far ahead, remember, 2020 showed how fast emergency powers can activate. 2022-2024 showed how quickly financial sanctions can lock assets. 2025 showed how critical minerals policy moved from theory into real export controls. Silver is now sitting right in the overlap of monetary hedging, strategic industry. Geopolitics rules evolve fast in that zone. So how do you prepare for an April that could bring more regulation, new classification of silver as critical, a potential BRICS re-monetization move, and shifting industrial demand? First, verify your storage. Ask yourself, where is my metal? Who legally holds it? Under what contract? If a critical mineral reporting rule lands, metal in bank-linked storage will be first in line to be mapped and monitored. Private vaults that operate under pure bailment, outside the banking system, will be next. Home storage will be largely invisible to these systems, which is both a benefit and a risk. Knowing which bucket your stack is in is not a paranoia exercise. It's risk management. Second, watch the gold-silver ratio into April. Historically, silver tends to outperform gold when risk spikes, compress the ratio hard once a move really gets going. If we see major headlines around BRICS reserve frameworks, new critical mineral mandates, and AI-driven upgrades in silver demand, there's a real chance that gold catches a bid first, on macro fear. Silver then rips as people realize how much more constrained it is relative to demand. If the ratio is already compressing going into April, any big announcement could accelerate that move. Third, receipts and records. You've heard me say this in the IRS $10,000 rule video, but it matters even more in a regulatory shift environment. If a dealer gets questioned, a bank storage program faces scrutiny, or you end up needing to prove source of funds or ownership, having neat, clear, time-stamped records, clean payment paths, wires, checks, documented cash where required, and a coherent story for how your stack was built will protect you far more than trying to stay in the shadows with messy patterns that can be misread as structuring or evasion. In a world where data is cross-matched, dealers are backed into corners, and regulators are focusing on critical stockpiles, being legible and boring on paper is a kind of privacy on its own. March is the pressure zone. April is the pivot. March tests whether COMEX can keep pretending its promises and its inventory still match. April could decide whether silver's role in the system is fundamentally rewritten. The great disconnect between paper and physical, east and west, is about to go. From trader circles and niche channels to central bank memos and official policy documents. Your job over the next 60 days isn't to predict every tick. It's to know where your metal sits, understand which rules it's exposed to, watch which kind of demand is about to grow no matter what the price does in the short term. What's your biggest fear for April? Government tracking and control? A full-on market freeze or default? Or missing the move because you waited for someone on TV to tell you it's safe to buy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one, and it helps me decide which angle to dig into next. If you want to stay on the right side of the vault door as these changes roll out, subscribe to RateScope and hit the bell. We're stepping into what could be the most important 60 days in silver's modern history. Stay sharp, stay stacking.